Sure.
Yeah, I can see it. So you can pause it now, but
Recording. Okay. And I will share my screen. Okay, I can start here. Okay, can everybody see my screen? I'm trying to make it presentation mode. It's not presentation mode. Okay, can everybody see in the presentation mode, or is it still small? It's good. Okay, just gonna put my time as well. 1 second. Okay. Yes.
Would you like us to give you a sign for time or no need?
I will have it here, but I'll try not to go too, and yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so I'll start. So the country I'm going to talk about today, it's on Lesotho. And okay, I'm going to start from just to give everybody, not just to jump into, the details of the expenditure revenue, but just to give everybody a snapshot of what this country looks like. Lesotho is a very small landlocked country and actually inside South Africa, and with about half of the population in poverty and about 24% in extreme poor. And the Human Development Index, it's very low. It's ranked 165 out of 189 countries, and there's a large gap in inequalities. And the Lesotho's national budget as a share of GDP is very high at 60.5%. This number is from 2019, 2020, so before COVID. And what characterizes the national budget is the high share of the wage bills in the government expenditure. And this is very high, one of the highest in the world, and it's also very high compared to the peer countries in that region. Now, just going into the details of the tax mix. So first of all, before going to tax mix, I just want to mention that the government revenue is characterized by high non-tax revenue, which comes from basically this Southern African country, the custom union, and this has been bringing a lot of money for Lesotho in terms of share of GDP, and so it has been very reliant on this revenue, and the revenue has been decreasing a little bit over the years. And because of that, for example, also I think in last year, the revenue not meeting its estimate actually gives a big deficit for the country. So this revenue is extremely important for Lesotho. So the tax revenue part comes mainly from goods and services and income, profit, and capital gains. And one thing we need to note that worth noting is that by this IMF classification, Lesotho actually do not have any revenues from social security contributions. So this is the characteristics of the Lesotho's tax mix. Next, just going to talk about the expenditure a little bit. So before we go into the expenditure of the social protection systems, just a quick overview of what social protection system in Lesotho looks like. So there is a national social protection strategy that spells out quite comprehensively what national social protection should look like in Lesotho. And it includes core and complementary programs. On the core programs, it includes child grants, which is poverty targeted. It's targeted at the most vulnerable children, the ultra poor. The old age pension for those that's over 70, also for those that's over 70. Public assistance, those are also those in poverty. Complementary programs include school feeding, which is everybody who's eligible. Orphans and vulnerable children bursary. This is also for vulnerable children. And tertiary bursary. This is actually for students to go on TVET or to university. And this is not, and this is considered highly relatively regressive because it also includes students that go to university and TVET who may not be in the vulnerable group category. So just to go into the expenditure for this social protection, it has been quite high compared to compared to other countries in general. And the biggest share of social assistance budget goes to tertiary bursary, which is 27% of total social protection spending, and old age pension. These are the top two spending under the social protection in Lesotho. And you can see the comparison with other countries as well. It's quite high in the other, compared to other countries as well. Just to go into the key performance and gaps of the social protection systems, I'm trying to move my face around here. Okay, good. Just to talk about the social protection, the key performance and gaps in three areas, let's say. One in coverage, second in benefit, and third in impact on poverty. The first one on coverage, as mentioned before, it's the social protection programs is very comprehensive in Lesotho. However, the coverage differs from program to program. The largest coverage, it's for old age pension and school feeding, which is 100%. In old age pension, it's actually more than 100%, which is also problematic. But some poverty targeted programs such as a child grant and public assistance, it has a very low coverage in terms of the coverage of the targeted group. So this is the coverage part. And on the benefit part, an old age pension, it's extremely high compared to others. And this one, with this old age pension, you can actually get out of poverty with this old age pension. However, for other programs, they are way below. Many are way below the food poverty line. For example, public assistance is 71% of the food poverty line, and 4%. The school feeding is only 4%. And you can see also that tertiary bursary is also very high. I don't know if you can see this. Also very high compared to the others. And on impact on poverty, it is assessed that the impact on poverty of these programs are actually quite high in terms of reducing poverty and inequality. And OH pension, it's highest of all the programs due to its coverage and benefit, as well as school feeding is due to its coverage. The others have impact on reducing inequalities, but not really enough to reduce poverty because of the benefit not being enough, the coverage being too small. Next, value for money. So as you might imagine, this very comprehensive system is managed across ministries. There are some, the Ministry of Social Development manages, for example, manages child grant, public assistance, OVC bursary. Ministry of Finance manages the old age pension. Ministry of Development Planning manages tertiary bursary. Ministry of Education manages school feeding, for example. So this very comprehensive system, but it's managed by different across ministries, so different systems, different operation and management systems. And there's a very high cost of delivery due to the lack of penetration of the banking system, and also just in general hard to reach areas. And the third is inefficiency, inclusion and exclusion errors. Just one example is old age pension covering more than 100% of targeted population. How does that even happen? There are people who's basically included in this that they're not supposed to receive this benefits, and all are non-contributory schemes. So they're in terms of value for money. There's all are funded by not by contributory schemes. High operational cost to transfer. Due to, as mentioned before, the high wage bill, that's one of the highest in the world. Basically, and you want anything the government of Lesotho to do, basically it's expensive because you pay a lot of money to the public servants. And high spending on regressive programs. This is not in specific on the tertiary bursary. This is not in line with social protection objectives. Basically, therefore, it's sort of inefficient in terms of reaching the objective of the social protection. So there are some ongoing efforts by the Lesotho government to actually tackle these inefficiencies and trying to increase value for money. One is the launch of the National Information System for Social Assistance, NISA, which is the social protection registry, and they're being trying to improve this and so on. And the second is to effort to combine operations certain programs, for example, those under Ministry of Social Development, increasing mobile payments to be more efficient payment and so on, and commitment to reduce wage bills in the long run. So for example, hiring freeze, they're not increasing they're not effectively increasing their, so they're keeping the nominal amount same, so therefore effectively reducing, for example. These are some of the efforts that the government has been doing. So some costed options. So some reform, some suggestion in terms of reform. First of all, the child grant, its proposed reform is the expansion of coverage and gradual increase of benefit in the long run, depending on the fiscal space. And estimated cost is about 1.1% of the GDP just to increase coverage for another 20% of the ultra poor. And the public assistance, expansion of similarly, expansion of coverage and gradual increase in benefit in the long run. It takes about 0.7% of GDP to extend to another 4% of those in, sorry, there's some typo in there, in the ultra poor. An OH pension to clean up the people who's there, exclude ineligible beneficiaries. And ask for proof of life, proof of life, I guess, of those that we are giving, for example, and lowering the benefit in real terms in the long run, gradually to be more in line with other programs as well. So cost saving potential could be significant, but this there's no estimated cost for this one at this moment. And for tertiary bursary, we should introduce means testing for income means testing to target only those that's most vulnerable, and not to include everybody who's go to the university or TVET. This could save up to 1.5% of GDP, considering that there's only 4%. I think I don't remember this. It's a very small percentage that's in the low-income families that's actually part of these programs. So most of the people who's included in these programs is actually not from the poor families. Just on the physical space, I'm conscious of the time. So there will be, this is very rough estimate of fiscal space, around 1 to 3% of GDP in the medium term, including and depending on program savings. So this is not just the ones that increase new, but it's those that's through sort of reprioritizing within the social protection programs. And through the fiscal space could be created in two ways. One is reduction of inefficiency within the social protection system, and the other one is through increase of overall social protection envelope in the long run. The first one on the reduction of inefficiency within social protection system, as mentioned a little bit before, on old age pension, lowering exclusion of ineligible beneficiaries from the program, lowering of effective benefit amount in the long term gradually, and tertiary bursary, introduction of income testing, expansion of NISA for common and better targeting, and strengthen common operation systems and improve cost-effective delivery modalities. So these are some of the suggestions to be able to increase inefficiency within the social protection system and creating fiscal space within the social protection system to actually use for actual transfer to families and those vulnerable people. And the other one is to increase overall protection envelope, social protection envelope. It's, for example, from the reduction of the wage bill in the long run, which government has already committed to. And also introduction of contributory schemes in the long run. However, because it's highly informal workforce, therefore this has to be hand in hand with some other policies, labor market policies and so on, which I will talk about more later. So medium-term costed plan, this is more on what do I suggest in terms of medium term. So the social protection sector reform I've already mentioned before. And this has to go hand in hand with enhance, so first of all, job creation and labor market policy, as we need to increase the total envelope and also decrease the actual need for this social protection schemes, as well as formalization of jobs so that we can start introducing contributory schemes and so on. So this is one. And it could be financed through currently what we have, because there are arrays of a lot of programs on job creation and labor market policy already, but this may not necessarily be aligned to social protection or actually the situation of the country. So there could be, for example, more emphasis on entrepreneurship instead of skilling, because we want more entrepreneur in this world, in this context when there isn't a lot of jobs, for example. And then enhanced social, on the other hand, we would like to also couple it with enhanced social services to make it to basically to talk work hand in hand with the social protection sector reform, so that we can transform the social protection transfers into actual human development, to translate it into human development through education and health and nutrition and so on. So this is a long-term part. It's also, all of them are basically going to be financed more or less through the existing programs, but basically for better map coordination and better prioritization and cost saving and so on. Just the core messages. This is a repetition of what has been discussed already. So just I will skip this slide actually. So what do we do in terms to leverage support for the reform within the public financial management cycle is, so first of all, for Lesotho, social protection, as you've seen in the high government expenditure, is already a national priority. And national strategy for social protection, this is a little bit outdated. It was formulated quite for a few years ago, and it could be revised. I don't actually know if it's going to be revised or not, but if it's going to be revised, this is a key moment of advocacy, definitely. And the key message for this is that we are not trying to advocate for a different kind of social protection scheme. So we are trying to reach the social protection goals and objective. That remains the same, but reform, it should aim to better overall impact on poverty, inequality, human economic development through social protection reforms to be more efficient and so on. And how do we engage on the social protection engagement of key stakeholders? So mainly there are four main stakeholders. One is the ministry that's in charge of reform program, especially for those old age pension and tertiary bursary programs, as we are basically suggesting downsides of their programs. So the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Development Planning, this has to be engaged really early on. And so on, and having also parliamentary advocacy, definitely, but this to engage for political support, but this could be influenced through public engagement and the public, so that we have a created appetite for parliament to actually say yes. An engagement of public, individuals and CSO through the budget formulation and implementation and so on, the whole process of the PFM, and to create budget as public demand for such reforms. And obviously internet, because Lesotho is it's a small country with lots of, money come from outside as well. So international organization development partners to actually have strong alliance and unified messages among, so for example, World Bank, IMF, and UN and development partners on what kind of reform we would like to propose. This could have a sort of like this could be a leverage. And obviously to support everything, we need evidence analysis to support engagement of stakeholders. But sorry, I'm 2 minutes over actually. Thank you so much. That's it. Over to me. Thank you. Any questions?
I would like to ask just a little on the grants and bursary slide.
Which one?
Yeah, the costed options. Yeah, this one. Yeah. So just to ask, the reasoning or the justification behind doing the means test for tertiary bursary, is it because education is unequally accessed by different income groups, or I'd like to ask the reasoning.
Yeah, I would. Yes, I'm actually, I haven't gone into really details about the reason why, but the program currently, I would assume yes, because university are the people who actually can go to university are the ones that's more privileged. So for TVET as well. So the actual, so I just want to show you, did I have this? So if you see this, do you still see this screen? So if you see this school feeding, oh, it's not here. Wait, maybe I didn't download this one. Sorry, I don't think I have this. I don't think I have this specific slide that I had in mind. But basically, the current program, those households that's in poverty, that's included in this program, I believe was like. I believe it was like it was like very small. I think it was like single digit in terms of percentage of students who's actually from the poor quartile to be included in this program. So the fact is that they don't have the program is being used by the beneficiary of these programs are not from the poor families. But I imagine the reasons are what you have suggested. Yes.
So there is a score threshold to receive the bursary. Must you achieve a certain score?
Currently, no. Currently, I understand that that's not the case, and that's why I'm suggesting to include income means testing for this scheme, basically to rule out those who actually can pay for it themselves. Actually, this third-year bursary, it's actually a loan, but the repayment rate is so low that it's practically a grant.
Oh, you see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or we can ask them to actually make them pay back, but I don't know how that's gonna be, how feasible that is when 95% of people don't pay back, for example.
Don't pay back at all, or there's no interest?
They don't pay back. So it's basically a grant.
A grant, yeah.
That's why in a lot of the studies that I read, it's considered as a grant, basically.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually a loan. Yeah. Any other questions? Great. Shall we go to the next step? Oh, I'll stop share. Mute myself.
So is Mohammed going next, or should I?
Okay, I will try to share.
Sorry, can we take maybe 2 minutes to do the peer assessment before Mohammed starts?
Yes, I totally forgot about that too. Well, I don't need to do it, but
I think it's three. It's three
Hello?
questions. That's fast.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, we can hear.
Yes, I'm Mamadou. I just joined the section. I was facing some technical problems, so I just joined your group. Okay.
Okay.
so I think we're going to do scoring for me.
Yeah.
So Mamadou, do you know how to access the scoring?
Yeah. I know. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I filled it.
Am I the only one who's not hearing anything, or?
No, I can hear. I'm done. Everyone else?
I have also done.
Shall we start then?
Okay.
Done.
Yes, we
Yes,
can
please.
start.
Hello. Everyone can see my see the screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Before proceeding to the subject matter of today's presentation, I would like to share some important facts about Pakistan, because I will talk about the Pakistan, a successor of the one of the old civilization, which is the Mughal Empire. When the old civilization in the Asian countries come into being on 14 August 1947, total area 800,000 square kilometer, population approximately 220 millions. It is federalism in exist in Pakistan. Total population is 220 million, and mostly 97% are Muslim. The current political and administrative structure in Pakistan is tier government, federal, provincial, and district. 5 provinces are in Pakistan, and Karachi and the Lahore, the biggest city of Pakistan. Now to the revenue and expenditure. This is a summary of the revenue and expenditure of Pakistan for the last year. When we look at expenditure and revenue, FBR taxes are basically direct and indirect, which include income tax, so general sale tax, and duties. Major portion is collected by the FBR, and other one is the non-tax revenues. And when we are look at the expenditure side, major portion Pakistan is paying back interest on the loans. Next liability is pensions, expenditures, and the third largest expenditure is the defense services. So mostly budget are used in the three components. When we look at the tax mix, there are the main three sector in Pakistan. Agriculture sector contribute 22.5% of GDP, but only 1.2% to the total tax revenue. Industry contribute 23.5% of GDP, 70.4% in the tax revenue. Services and other sector 54% in GDP, but 28% in tax revenue. So means agriculture sector being the contributor of GDP, but contribute only 1.2% to the tax revenue. When we are look for the social protection expenditure, when it is the total in 2013-14, it is 1.9 trillion in Pak rupees. It is increasing from 7.7%, 8% in 15-16 to 9.3%. 9.3%. This the main expenditure in social protection is the social security welfare include expenditure of this is the cash transfer program in line with the sustainable development goals and other social protection financial assistance to the disabled peoples. Key assessment social protection system, key performance means a comprehensive rationalization of operations is required to consolidate all the programs with increased outreach and include informal sector, especially informal sector workers. Currently, the informal sector of Pakistan is not documented, and the worker of the informal sector cannot be transferred any benefit due to the non-availability of their data, etc. Currently, program of social protection are not properly evaluated to lesson learned for the improvement of the new social protection programs, etc. The government should increase the overall spending on social protection, particularly increase in benefits for the disabled. In Pakistan, almost 3 to 4% population is disabled and as well as old age. And currently, population exists on the young people, which are growing towards the old age, and ultimately, one decade, mostly population will be in this bracket. So therefore, government should increase spending on the old age benefits and for disabled. Continue. There is also uncertainty in Pakistan while preparing a social protection program. How much budget is required? Government cannot support unless the budget is finalized at the federal level and then it transferred to the provinces for their shares. When all development budget is prepared, after that portion of the budget is leftover used for the social protection program. Value for money. There are different measures which needs to be implemented for the value for money in Pakistan. Integrated social protection system. There are social protection programs on federal level, provincial level, as well as district level. These programs are not integrated each other. They are doing at their own. There is duplications. It is proposed to attain the value for money. Integrated social protection system may be introduced. A unified beneficiary registry. A unified registry should be maintained for all the beneficiaries under the social protection program. Inclusion of informal sector, development of labor registry, and a skill development program for the labor force as per desired needs of the product. Currently, there is no plan. There is social skill development program in Pakistan, but they are not integrated. They are not as per the needs of the grant market, etc. Use unconditional cash transfer all three peoples, unconditional cash transfer disabled, and contributory employment schemes, which are maybe unemployment insurance, in contributory provident fund and contributory pensioner trust scheme may be introduced to attain the value of money. The following costed options are suggested. Integrated social protection system needs to be to $20 million and unifies beneficiary registry $10 million, inclusion of informal sector. This may be not required additional cost, but it may be attained by relaxing of law in the country. Development of labor registry, capacity building of the force means skill development program for the productive labor, productive environment, $100 million. Social pension, elderly people, $100 million. Unconditional cash transfer, people with disabilities, 50 million, and it is suggested that there may be need $390 million for these options. How to how to create a physical space in the current economy of Pakistan. We look at the facts. This can be created by technical assistance by the international partner. Currently, international partner like World Bank, FCDO, IMF, facilitating the government of Pakistan to improve its economy by guiding, by imposing many sanctions, favorable sanctions, so that the physical space may be created. Taxation of luxury cars and items like ACs and like that. Imported luxury item may be taxed. Taxation of big houses and farmhouses, clubs may be taxed for the social protection to create physical space. Taxation on imported luxury food item, tax reform and agriculture. As evident from the last slide, that agriculture is a big sector contributing in the GDP, but in the tax revenue, it contributes only 1.2%. Therefore, it seems that tax reforms in the agriculture will be required. Minimize the unreasonable tax exemption. In Pakistan, many sectors are exempted from the tax for special purposes. Therefore, to create a physical space, this tax exemption may be withdrawn. Contributory insurance for the workers. Currently, many schemes, especially for currently launched labor worker card. This is not the contributory scheme. So therefore, this scheme in future may be converted into contributory insurance schemes. The way forward. There are needed to develop a coordination framework, clarify between the provincial and the federal governments to implement a program as well as streamlining the systems. At the provincial level, consolidate and streamline social protection agencies program as a single administrative entity following the mode of the Punjab Social Protection Authority. Elimination of duplication and overlaps. There are duplications and overlaps in the current system because federal government are also transferring the resources where the provincial government introducing the social protection program, developing a framework to improve effective and implement plans for capacity performance enhancement of organizations, explore options to create a more equitable balance between the direct and indirect taxes to net for the direct. Currently in Pakistan, there are indirect taxes are levied on the end user of the product, but these are also received in advance from the corporation companies. Therefore, it is suggested that a balance between the direct and indirect taxes may be created. Scaling the current organization in the social protection sector need to be reorganized and scaling up to facilitate the more and more marginalized people of the country. Thank you. Any question?
I have a question. Thank you, Mohammed,
Yeah.
for your presentation. I was wondering if looking at the key performance and the gaps, you could tell us a bit more about the current level of coverage of some programs, level of benefits. Yeah, if you can tell us a bit more maybe of in terms of
currently one program we are executing is the social pension for elderly people. Last year this program was introduced, and up to now 80,000 beneficiaries have been registered in this program. In Pak rupees we are paying monthly 2,000, and quarterly we transfer them to their mobile banking accounts. And from there, they can withdraw their funds by means of biometric verification. And other ones is the program for unconditional cash transfer for the people with disabilities. And almost 90,000 people have been registered. And in this program, we are paying 1,500 for people with disability but can work, and 2,000 for a person who is unable to do any work. And third one, we are introduced recently a program where we are paying 3,000 per month to the transgender persons. And also we are doing effort to include in the community by advocacy and extra. And the one program is also there is a stipend health and nutrition program for the girls studying in the early 6 to 10 class, and where we are paying 1,000 per month for the girls student attaining the 80% attendance. This is a conditional cash transfer. And as well as in the COVID pandemic, government of Punjab, government of Pakistan paid almost 120 billion rupees to the people affected by the COVID pandemic. And these funds are also transferred through the mobile banking. And currently also the recent survey, poverty survey, which is based on the proxy mean testing. Testing has been completed and data compilation is in process. Once the data has been compiled, national socio-economic registry will be finalized, and all the program, social protection program, and as well as subsidies by the government will be linked to the socio-economic social registry, and all the in future all the program, social protection program will be targeted instead of universal.
I guess there's no more questions. Should we go into the assessment?
Okay.
Mohammed,
Yeah.
please, can you tell me about the extension program? What kind of program do you propose to extend the association program?
As I have already discussed that I propose that all the program existing or future should be targeted instead of universal, and the social economic registry, which is in the process of finalization and within next 3 months will be finalized. And after that, it is suggested that all the program, whether it is unconditional or conditional, should be linked to the socio-economic registry and targeted. For example, the social pension for the elderly people. Currently, this is in the one province of the Pakistan. This should be scaled up to the whole Pakistan. The program for the cash transfer the transgender persons, this should be increased to the whole Pakistan, and as well as program conditional cash transfer for the peoples with disability. This should be scaled up in the whole Pakistan.
Okay, okay. But you evaluate the cost in terms of GDP. Did you have any evaluation in terms of GDP?
I think currently we are spending very less amount on social protection. Only last total expenditure of 7.7% of total expenditure, not GDP. When I convert it to the GDP, it comes from 2%. So I think this should be increased.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
I'm done with the assessment.
Me too.
Yeah, I feel that.
Okay. Should I go
Mamad,
next?
Mamadou, are you done with the assessment?
No, not already. His name is Muhammad.
I think on the portal it says Assam Muhammad.
Assam Muhammad, okay.
I think on the portal it was that, because I think there's another Muhammad.
Assam Muhammad, okay, okay.
Yeah, I think it's Assam Muhammad.
Am I the next? I
Okay.
think, right?
I guess so.
I can go, or yeah. Are you ready, or I also have?
I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, I'll go right after.
Okay,
I'll start
ready.
when Mamadou is done.
Okay, so it's okay. I'm ready.
Are you? Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll just put a timer for myself. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues. Please mute your microphone. Thank you. I'll be presenting on the case of Zambia. So yeah, starting with revenue and expenditure, the situation of Zambia is a bit different from what colleagues have presented on their countries. The total revenue, in fact, has met quite a slight decrease from 2005 to 2019, as you can see from the figures, mostly due to the declining copper prices, which is the main export of Zambia, and very recurrent drought, which have very much affected the growth of the country, which has been in constant decline since 2012. Nonetheless, the country has seen a marginal increase in tax revenue, going from 14% of GDP in 2005 to 16% in 2019, according to the IMF. So as you can see, the tax to GDP ratio in Zambia fits pretty much in the average ratio for African countries, which is around 16%. However, is much lower than other surrounding countries in the SADC group, such as higher income countries such as Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa. In terms of expenditure, this has fluctuated between 28 to 27% of GDP throughout the same period, 2015 to 2019. So as you can see, this is a recurrent deficit that the government of Zambia has tried to fill in with domestic and external borrowing, thus accumulating, though, a very significant debt. The major expenditure, as in the case of Lesotho that Yoshiko presented, is really on general public service, so in the wage bill and on economic affairs. Social protection really receives a very minimum amount of that expenditure, and in fact, social contributions are not reported at all by the government. We just have a new government elected in Zambia since August. They have announced an expansionary budget, which is a positive thing. However, analysts have already identified that the wage bill will absorb over 30% of domestic revenue and the debt service over 80% of domestic revenue, which essentially means that together these two items will already absorb 110% of budget domestic revenue. This doesn't leave really much space for non-discretionary expenditure, for discretionary expenditure such as social protection one, which then raise concerns about how is the government going in fact to finance social protection. Moving forward to the tax mix. In Zambia, majority of taxes are actually direct income taxes. They have not changed very much in that period of time, so from 2005 to 2019, for which we have data available. The interesting bit is that the tax burden on individuals is much higher than on companies, which came to me quite a bit as a surprise. And I can only justify that by considering that it's easier for the government to actually recover taxes to the payee system rather than through companies, with the difficulties, particularly for the minerary sector. VAT comes second at about 30% of total revenue, representing 2% of GDP. Then also the government benefits from excise taxes and custom and export duty. The tax regime has not changed very much in the past 5 years, with a slight decrease in income taxes and a slight increase in VAT. So the system is progressive in a way, because then the majority of taxes actually come from direct income taxes, but there is a disproportionate burden on individuals rather than companies. There are expected changes to be implemented with the new 2022 budget. Particularly, the government has made mineral royalties deductible in the hope that this will actually incentivize minerary company to contribute further to the economy. Now, moving forward, specifically focusing on expenditure, on social protection system expenditure. In case you cannot see well the graph, the social protection bit is the top segment in dark green. As you can see, there's been in 2021, so further to COVID, social protection has received the highest allocation ever in absolute terms, as well as the largest share ever of national budget, 4%. So we can say that yes, there's been an increase, but in reality, social protection still remains the smallest or one of the smallest part of broader government expenditure, much behind, as you can see, general public affairs or economic affairs or even education. There's been an increase from 0.6% of GDP in 2016 to 1.3% in 2021. Very much contrary to what Yoshiko was presenting about the case of Lesotho, the expenditure for social protection in Zambia in the past few years has been one of the lowest, averaging to 0.2%, particularly for social assistance programs. Until 2020, the majority of the expenditure was actually on the contributory side, specifically on the public sector pension fund, and the situation has only reversed now with COVID, where social assistance program starting from 2021 have received a larger amount of the social protection expenditure. However, the greatest problem, the greatest issue in Zambia is really underspending, the execution of budget, which is very deficient, to the point that from 2014 to 2018, underspending has actually increased from 24% to 50%, with the social cash transfer program, the largest social assistance program, having the lowest execution rate at 65%, if I remember correctly. So no matter essentially what the budget announces, the execution rate in reality is much lower. Finally, just to mention that out of the data that was available, I was able to see that still donor contribution is essential to the social protection expenditure in Zambia, and out of only the social assistance program, which are managed by the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services, 22% in 2021 is still funded by donors. In terms of key performance and gaps, the situation in Zambia definitely requires a significant effort on the part of the government to strengthen the social protection system, because the amount of population living under the poverty line is the overwhelming majority. In fact, is 57% of people live under the poverty line in 2021. This is approximate to about 10 million people. There are about 18 million people living in Zambia right now. The adequacy of the social protection program currently available is considered to be quite low, in the sense that they, particularly for the social assistance side, they reach about 14 to 20% of household annual consumption. In 2022, the government is proposing an increase in transfer amounts, which is considered to be meaningful in terms of real value by the analysts. The coverage is still very limited, so this is a massive problem. The social assistance program only covers about 4 million people, so they have 4 million people enrolled, which represent about 23% of the population. The social cash transfer alone covers about 600,000 households, and this only is equivalent to 16% of poor households. So as you can see, majority of poor people still doesn't have access to any social protection program in Zambia. Again, the government is proposing to increase the caseload of the social cash transfer program in 2022 to about 1 million. The situation is a bit different for the contributory side. The pension schemes covers about 13% of the population. However, it used to receive a higher allocation, but Eni also has a higher execution rate. So again, we can see that on the contributory system, we do have a quite regressive situation, where majority of funding is actually allocated to a program that only reaches public servants, defense personnel, so a very minimal part of the population. Now, in terms of positive and negatives, Zambia benefits from a legal framework, which is definitely a plus on the National Social Protection Policy. Program has been evaluated for impact, and they are considered to be pro-poor targeted. Impact of social protection has been very well documented even last year in correspondence of COVID, and so emergency cash transfer, for example, have been put in place, and they have had a clear impact on decreasing the impact of COVID. On the negative side, there is huge program and institutional fragmentation. Financing financing is unpredictable. So even the actual caseload, they don't receive funding in time, and the execution rate, as I mentioned, is extremely low at 65%. The pension system is regressive, and most of the amount annually allocated is actually spent on arrears. In terms of value for money, I will go straight to the reform in consideration of time, and I'm happy to respond to any questions if you like more details afterwards. So as I said, the key issues is really fragmentation and inefficiency. So the best reform should be to improve efficiency, to promote integration, so merging or retargeting of programs, utilization of the same system. Like, for example, the MIS system should be based on the social cash transfer database, which is the largest one. Coordination can be improved both at policy level as well as at implementation level, and there are already steps in this direction. And in terms of cost efficiency and effectiveness, there's a lot that the government can do to improve value for money, reviewing targeting, increase linkages amongst programs, update the benefit value for inflation, consolidate caseloads. In practice, what the government needs to do is to implement the integrated framework of basic social protection program, which was in fact approved already in 2018. Now, in terms of costed option, here I've basically considered the value of the existing social cash transfer program, which is a household transfer and the largest program in Zambia. And I've proposed the introduction of some specific grant related to most vulnerable populations, such as children, children with disability, and old age pension. I won't go into the numbers because it will take too long, but essentially these are the criteria that I have applied. The social cost transfer system per se already covers a number of these groups. They already cover over 65, people over 65, people with disability, women with female-aided household with more than 3 children, child-headed households. So part of this population is in fact already reached by the social cash transfer system. I wanted also to maintain the budget allocation realistic on the basis of what the government has announced for next year and on the basis of what is already available. So I kept the budget allocation in local currency to 4.5 million kwacha, and this is approximate 1% of GDP. If you recall, in 2021, it was 1.3%. So I'm staying around the same numbers. Currently, the system is also unbalanced towards the elderly and people with disabilities, leaving almost nothing to cater for the needs of children and families with children. So I rather expanded on child grant and child disability grant rather than on the old age pension. In terms of potential fiscal space, there's a lot that the government can do. Some of this measure can be applied in the short term and some others in the medium and long term. Definitely the first thing the government should do is to increase efficiency and reallocate expenditure to social protection. Disinvest from the farmer input support program, which is highly regressive, is basically a subsidy for farmers, and from energy subsidy, which absorb almost 10% of GDP. So there's a lot that can be extracted from that sector. Tax revenue should be increased. There is already a plan in that sense for 2022. The biggest issue in Zambia in the medium to long term is the reduction or the restructuring of debt. And the government is currently in negotiation with the IMF for that. You need to consider that 33% of government revenue is actually allocated to debt payment. So there's a lot that the government could do if that could be adjusted. In the short term, I believe that the shortfall of government can only be supported by international development partners. In the long term, definitely there should be effort to expand coverage of social security to informal workers, which represented the 70% of the labor workforce. And also there's a lot that can be done in terms of elimination of illicit financial flows, mainly in terms of the minerary extraction. Other option that I wanted to suggest, and that I found in the relevant literature, is the creation of a sovereign wealth funds, similar to what Botswana is doing, particularly in the expectation that copper prices will increase. So this can create a ring-fenced budget for the government to utilize for social protection and other social sector spending. In terms of the medium-term costed plan, I costed the same program until 2035. Again, I won't go into the numbers. These are some of the criteria that I've considered. I wanted to prioritize the extension of coverage. As I mentioned, I think this should be really the priority. So by 2035, I've expanded this. I'm proposing to expand these programs in a way that they cover over 50% of each of these categories. So children with disabilities, elderly people, and vulnerable households. I wanted to prioritize less protected groups, as I mentioned. I wanted to ensure a progressive increase in benefit value to GDP per capita standards so that each benefit actually meets at least the 20% of GDP per capita. I considered a projected growth of 1.3%, which, as you can see, is really not very large. I considered an adjustment to inflation. This is precisely because GDP per capita is actually projected to grow negatively rather than positively for Zambia. So really the outlook is not very positive, and I wanted to apply a conservative approach. So overall, what I'm proposing is a measure that will utilize 2.3% of GDP, so about 12.8 billion kwacha, an increase essentially of 1 percentage of GDP in the next 15 years. Finally, the core messages for government, it's really that the government commitment is clear and it's appreciated, but it now needs to be matched with full financing of budget allocation. There is a very a strong focus in Zambia on private sector-led growth, and it's important that the government is encouraged to see how social protection can contribute to that by increasing productivity of labor force, for example, and by contributing as a whole to the increase of the economy. COVID-19 has actually demonstrated clearly to government how important social protection is and how important it is to build shock responsive social protection systems. So definitely it's a worthy investment. Finally, in terms of the PFM cycle, the main suggestion that I will feel able to recommend are that planning and budgeting should be done by cluster rather than agency at planning stage to reduce inefficiency and competition between different agencies actually managing and implementing social protection. In terms of execution, this is the key element. It's important that social protection expenditure is ring-fenced by the government to ensure that commitments are realized. In terms of monitoring and advocacy, CSO are already starting to be involved. Already there's a lot more than can be done, but we saw already a positive example in the engagement of civil society in the campaigns during the current election. Beyond the budget cycle, Zambia really needs to implement a long-term sustainable finance strategy to replace donor support and make sure that they actually meet their national development plans target. So I'll stop here. Sorry, I think I've gone a little bit more over time. Over to you.
Oh, okay, thank you, Maria.
Yes.
On the potential fiscal space, what is the total amount did you calculate with all this measure? What the total amount we can get at the first year if you apply all these measures?
Right. Thank you, Mamadou, for your question. I'm not suggesting to apply all this measure in the next year. I think this has to be a phased approach. So I'm indicating some that can be applied straight away, like, for example, increase of ODA and reallocation of expenditures. So number 1 and number 4, and others that are more for the medium and short term. I didn't do an exact calculation, but I believe that only by measure number 1, as you can see, these programs, the Farmer Input Support Program and the Energy Subsidy, these are farmers and energy subsidies, are very regressive and inefficient, and they occupy 10% of GDP. So I believe that they will be more than sufficient to support an increase of 1% of GDP, which is what I'm proposing in my medium-term costed plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
SA. When you talk about SA program, what does it mean, please? SA
Social
program.
assistance.
Social assistance. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Should I stop sharing?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'm done.
I'm going to start the share first.
Jaren?
Yep.
Can you maybe adjust your camera because we cannot really see half of your face?
Okay, because the screen is facing up. Okay.
Muhammad Mahmoudou, are you done with the assessment?
I have done.
Yes, okay, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Gets over to you then, Jaren.
Okay, so today I will be speaking about Malaysia. So just for some quick facts, Malaysia's is about 300 billion in GDP in US dollars, in Malaysian ringgit. So that's 80 to 90 billion in US dollars. So first I wanted to introduce the revenue and expenditure of the country. So this is the federal government revenue and expenditure since we started keeping record in the 70s. So as you can see, expenditure has consistently exceeded revenue in most years since the 70s. And it has been that case for over the past 2 decades, except for a couple of years in the 90s where revenue exceeded expenditure for a short while. So I think we follow the typical pattern of a developing country. We collect the tax slowly on a growing economy. So the percentage slowly increases. However, our tax revenue as a percentage of GDP is a lot lower in the most recent 5 years. You see the drop off in the 2012 time when it fell below 25%, and it has remained low for the last couple of years. Or it could be the growth in the economy where that makes the percentage lower, but it is also the tax collection which has not kept up with the growth of the economy. And in the same time span of the last 8 years, we've also seen a rise in inequality at the same time. So the intricacies will be explored in the next page. So this is our tax mix, the public finance. Of course, this is from the OECD database shared by our Ministry of Finance to them. So I wanted to highlight the 3 main sources. So direct tax would be the first one, where it comes in the income, profit, and capital gains. This is where more than half, almost 60% of our revenue comes from direct taxing on corporations and personal income. So personal income is another half of corporate income. So you can see the majority of our income comes from corporations, followed by people. However, thing to note is that personal income is only paid by 2 million people in Malaysia's labor force, while our labor force is 14 million. So the tax base is really small. 2 million out of 14 million pay this income tax. Our social security contributions is really low from a public expenditure perspective. That's because we carry out a defined contribution scheme, which is Malaysia's Provident Fund, where we run individual accounts. So each private sector worker has to contribute in their own individual account, which they cannot withdraw until the age of 55. So that is the reason that our public expenditure on social contributions is pretty low. These are really token amounts that the government pays out for their own workers, the civil service. The third one is the indirect tax of goods and services. So this would be our consumption taxes, excises, and import duties. So this is about half of our direct tax, and it has been on the rise in recent years. So you see the right-hand side graph, there was a big spike in our VAT and goods and services, the dark brown one. That's because we finally implemented the GST, or VAT as it is known in most of this world. The goods and services tax, or value added tax, is an efficient step-by-step system that taxes at every stage and then is refunded to the business. So in that sense, it is a very transparent system. So there was a large jump when we converted from our previous sales tax to the GST VAT. So that's the reason for our large jump. However, we changed our government in 2018, and for political reasons, they converted it back to the sales tax. But we didn't see a drop because with the GST already in place, it was collecting at an efficient rate, and it had made transparent many of the processes that were previously undiscovered. You could say it is a small formalization of a lot of informal processes. Okay, so that's a quick introduction of our revenue and tax mix. I want to speak a bit of the expenditure on our social protection system. So I selected this one to show an expenditure by ministries so that it is a better understanding of where the money goes to. So naturally, education and health consistently receive the highest allocations. This shows the past 2 years, 2020 and 2021. So education and health always receives the highest allocations. So both having a strong impact on our socio-economic outcomes. Ministries that I point out could receive more focus in the future would be housing, agriculture, and works, as they are the ministries involved in building the infrastructure, which is the basis of productivity and improving our labor market conditions. So housing is really low. Agriculture and works are three of the actually really important ministries who receive not even half of even the health or education ministries combined. We also have tagging on the operating and developing expenditure. Operating would be the cost of paying wages and civil service, whereas developing would be something focused fully on infrastructure. So our operating expenditure is way too high compared to the DE, and has to be something that has to be addressed urgently. This is because our emoluments and wages has grown in significant portions over the years, because a caveat is that the civil service receives a pension for life, as well as their spouse. So this has caused the wage bill to really increase when life expectancy increase. And the civil service, even with the increase of retirement age from 55 to 60, it has not slowed down the growth of our wage bill. So the operating expenditure would grow out of hand if no reforms are made urgently. These are some of the key performance and gaps that have been identified in our social protection system. So the current gaps that we face, of course, is our insufficient old age savings, as well as coverage gaps and exposure of vulnerable groups to economic difficulty. As described, our private sector is only covered by your individual self, which you must save on a mandatory retirement savings. This means that there is no solidarity and there is no risk pooling in a defined contribution. So this puts vulnerable groups at individual risk because the state does not take on that risk. Besides that, we also suffer from a bit of slow growth in our wages and a rising cost of living at the same time, because our labor income as a share of GDP has stagnated at around 40 to 44%. Yeah. So labor income is still below the global average, should be above 45 at least. So some of the future vulnerabilities that we should prepare for is an aging population and a shrinking labor force. That would not come until the next 30 to 40 years because the births have just peaked 2 years ago. So we should expect a reduction in labor force in 40 to 50 years when they are retiring. Secondly is our increased healthcare needs and rising NCDs, the non-communicable diseases. And thirdly is some job instability and the automation and mechanization of manual jobs. So this would mean that the labor market would need some reforms to make sure that unemployment does not grow too high when machines take over human jobs. For the proposed social protection reforms, I actually chose a single program to propose because I wanted to go into more details of it. This is the value for money of a universal child benefit, something that is totally missing from our social protection system. So a proposed reform would be for children aged 0 to 6. The reason for 0 to 6 is because our children actually start primary school at the age of 7. So 0 to 6 would be the pre-schooling years to cover. In that case, there should be no means test so that all households are eligible. And the proposed benefit is 150 per month in local currency, ringgit. So that will turn out to 1,800 per year. For context, 1,800 ringgit is about $400 US. So this estimated, this scheme alone would be estimated at 0.44% of GDP. We consider it because investing in children at the vulnerable stage would make sure that their most basic needs are met, and particularly for the nutrition and educational outcomes. This is proposed to be supplemented with later on incentive to encourage children to stay in school through primary and secondary schooling years. For the cost option, I've used the Excel to try to put some expenditure in the future years. So if 2021, we would start with 150. As mentioned, the live childbirths have recently peaked. So we can expect the population of 0 to 6 years old children to reduce in the coming years. So 50 ringgit increase per month could be done every 5 years. So in 2025, 2030, and 2035. So as a percentage of GDP per capita, it actually reduces because the costs would reduce and the economy is growing at the same time. And the cost does increase from 6.6 billion to eventually 12.4 billion, but it is a smaller percentage of GDP. Of course, the parameters could be adjusted in the future if desired so, or if it has a counter effect on fertility rates, because in a way this would perhaps maintain or help Malaysia to maintain fertility rates at the population replacement rate, keep it above 2.1. Yeah, since live births have just peaked in 2018. So potential to find some fiscal space for this money. It would be the main priority is the reallocation of public expenditure. The current setup of our system is fragmented, whereby many initiatives have been launched, but plagued with lack of coordination. So 2 or 3 ministries could handle the same initiative, and that causes a lot of overlapping, and people don't like to go into others' purview or crossover. So there's room for optimization. Secondly, would be to increase tax revenue. As stated just now, tax revenue has actually dropped under 25% in the last 8 years. So there are a lot of space to collect more revenue. It has actually dropped to 10 to 15%. So there could be an upward revision for more income tax. We have one of the lower brackets in the region at 30%, and corporate tax as well at 25%, which also has room for increasing. And of course, bringing back the efficiency of the consumption tax would be good. Thirdly, will be expanding coverage and introducing contributory revenue, because right now we have no defined benefit to speak of. We don't have a defined benefit system. So starting a couple of schemes such as child benefit or old age pension system would be a brand new introduction. It should be tax financed at first, and then eventually be contributory, so that we have something that can pool risk and facilitate solidarity, something that is particularly missing. Fourthly, of course, Malaysia is actually a top 5, something not to be proud of in illicit financial flows. There's a lot of illicit money flowing through the country, and not just loss of government revenue, but also unrecorded economic activity. This is a low-hanging fruit to address, but of course this issue is if political will desires, which is something that is particularly hard in the PE, in the political economy. This is a medium-term plan. It mostly states what has been described. The cost would be projected to decrease, so any future tax revenue should increase with the growth of the economy, and the benefit can be revised upwards. It will be important to have transparent budgeting on the expenditure, and the decision-making process should be made public for public engagement. And a school attendance benefit would be a good supplement to this scheme as part of the life cycle approach, so that it covers step by step each stage of a person's life. And the way forward, these are some of the core messages. I wanted to show the level of coverage for social protection policies based on funding. So the funding mechanism, of course, voluntary contributions is something that the individual does, that they invest themselves into their own retirement schemes. That is no solidarity. Secondly would be the mandatory contributions, which we currently have. And thirdly would be the basic needs, which is the social protection floor, something that usually the government should provide. And that should be healthcare, basic income security for children, basic income security for working age individuals, and then basic income security for the elderly. So three of the main points is that the social protection gaps have underlying effects that are not easy to discern. And implementing a scheme that assists a person's early childhood years will have seen significant impact in the future generations. And universality would be the most efficient method to distribute these benefits, while also being acceptable in the political economy and for public sentiment. So to wrap it up, some of the ideas to leverage support for reform in the PFM, of course, to engage the stakeholders through media, and transparent information would be the main one, so that people understand what is happening. Universality will be popular, so it would seem to have minor pushback, although people might ask why high-income people should receive this. But academics and think tanks have always advocated that utilizing their empirical studies would be great for supporting evidence. It would be important to generate bipartisan support from both sides of the political divide to ensure the program duration is not dependent on any political terms. And lastly is to make medium to long-term plans to establish a timeline for revision of scheme parameters. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you. If there are any questions, I can answer.
I have a question. Thank you, Jaren. Yeah, I was wondering if you can tell us a bit more. Apologies if maybe I missed it. I think you had a slide on social protection expenditure. And my question is whether, is there a specific ministry or agency which is actually responsible for most of social protection programming? And if you can clarify, if you had that information, how much is the country actually spending in social protection right now? I wasn't clear on that. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay, I do have the information. Let me just type it out. It is currently 19.1 billion in ringgit, in ringgit Malaysia, and our percentage of GDP is really small. It is currently 3% at our estimates. So to answer your question, we do have a ministry that houses most of the program. It is actually called the Ministry of Women, Children, and Community Development. So it is actually not listed here because their budget is the smallest. We actually have major and minor ministries. So the ones listed here are actually major ministries. And like our Ministry of Youth and Sports is a minor ministry, as well as the Ministry of Women, Children, and Community Development. So you can see the very low emphasis of our government on social and cultural development, because these remain minor ministries with much smaller budgets than the major ministries. And the perception in Malaysia is still to channel a lot of spending into education and health. People try to understand that as social protection because universal healthcare is always touted as something to be provided for. And to a certain degree, health is well taken care of. Public health is fully provided, heavily subsidized, and accessible by everyone. But for something that is more focused, this is the reason that it is stated that Malaysia's coordination is still not there. Like there can be programs under the Ministry of Women, Children and Community Development, but there are also branch out programs in youth and sports, as well as health and education that always overlap each other. So we always find that they have purviews that cross over, and it is a very sensitive topic when ministers have purview that crosses each other, and they are not keen on stepping on each other's toes. So that is the difficulty, and that's why we propose that it is actually a great idea to have just a ministry for welfare, yeah, to cover social protection. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. And if there are any others, now we can proceed. Okay, so shall I conclude? Then we can move to the next. Thank you.
I'm done.
I'm done as well.
Mamadou, are you able to share your camera, your video, or not possible?
I have also done.
Okay. I share my presentation. Do you see my presentation? I share my
Yes.
screen. Okay. And
Yes.
then I open my camera too.
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, okay. Thank you. So I will start my presentation. I'm Mamadou Konate from Ivory Coast. I will present the social protection extension in my country, my proposed social protection extension program. Côte d'Ivoire is a West African country with 27 million inhabitants. The first things I will present the general public finance in my country. In the period from 2009 to 2019, we see that the total revenue and donation increased by 9%, in line with the favorable trend in tax and non-tax 20% revenue. At the same time, the total expenditure increased by 4%, driven mainly by operating expenses for 42%. Capital spending rose at 8% in the period, and the average budget deficit over the period is 3% of GDP. But due to COVID-19, the deficit in 2020 fell by 5% above the community standard of 3%. About the tax mix, The main sources of revenue are tax on goods and services for 45%. Come later, the VAT taxes represent 23% of tax revenue. The social security contribution represent 7% in 2018. The tax to GDP ratio from 1990 to 2018 has remained relatively stable. On average, it represents 60% of GDP. This level is significantly lower than the West African Economic and Monetary Union threshold. It's 20%. In Africa, in general, we are around 19%, and in Lake Country, 95%. EOCD average tax to GDP in 2015, it was 34%. So my country has a sufficient room to increase its tax revenue. The assessment of social protection system, the expenditure. So you see the total expenditure is around 1.6% of GDP at this time, from 2016 to 2018. And but the most of the spending on social protection go to the pension scheme for the non-poor. The expenditure of contributory pension scheme amount 1.56% of GDP. Even excluding private sector pension funds spending from the analysis, the results are similar. The government still devotes 90% of social protection funding to pensions largely benefit to non-poor. In contrast, spending on subsidies and transfer, include fuel prices, subsidy, etc., was double that on social protection at 2.6. The gaps, the performance gaps, you see that the olders only 11% are covered. There is nothing for the disabled, almost nothing. Family benefits is around 1%. Women giving birth, 4% covered. Unemployed, nothing for them. So the vast majority of the population is excluded from the social protection system in my country. Only 5% of the population protect in at least one area of social protection. Value for money. There is no enough data in the social, in non-contributive social protection. I don't find enough data on this subject, but relating to the employee schemes, I just calculate some TCTR ratio. Then I found out the family benefits as the highest total cost efficient ratio with 1.33. This branch is the least cost efficient, mainly due to the low level of service offered. The performance of the pension branch is deteriorating from here to here, going from 1.25 to 1.27. Particular emphasis must be placed on reducing administrative costs in this branch. To improve the performance of the retirement pension branch, it will be necessary to raise the level of pension and extend the beneficiary to all elders. So the cost option I propose for the social protection, I propose to establish a social pension of 30,000 local currency units for all the elders above 16 years old. And the poorest elder will be rigorously and identify and include in the system free of charge. So it will cost 1.55% of GDP in the long term. The extension of the productive social safety net is currently benefiting to 50,000 households. Though we will extend to all the poor households in the country. It will cost 1.8% of GDP. The unemployment assistance for formal and informal workers It will be granted for over 6 months, and the cost is estimated to 1.33. The total cost of these non-contributory benefits is around 4.7% of GDP. This extension program will allow us to guarantee the social protection flow for old age and ensure minimum income to unemployment and poor households. So potential tax space. So the tax revenue in my country is low. So exclude donation and expect the tax revenue are expected to 12.7% of GDP, about 1% of GDP below the WAIMU average. It is the West African Economic Organization, and well below the 20% of GDP WAIMU target. The largest gap with respect to peers lies in VAT revenue at below 3% of GDP. They are only about half what non-oil frontier market country collect. The government has identified VAT, mining, digitization, and property tax as key area to broaden the tax base, and underline their intention to continue to implement this, strengthen their action plan to rationalize tax expenditure. The VAT exemption for sectors such as green and oil seed industry represent 2.5% and 2% of GDP respectively. The VAT exemption for the construction sector represents 0.5% of GDP. In total, only the lifting of the exemption will be able to create a fiscal space of 5% of GDP. So for the medium-term cost plan, I propose to scale the program on three periods. In 2022, we have to scale the age of social pension to 16 years old. And then after we scale to 65 years old, and after we come to the 60 years. So all these things are already evaluated. So it's progressively putting in place. The productive social safety net is the same thing. For the first years, we continue with the 50,000 household, and then later we extend to 16,000 household. It is the current extent per household in my country. And then later you extend to all the poor households. Unemployment assistance, it was existing. This program was existing in the past years in my country. So I just want to recover, to put in place again. So it will represent at term 1.33% of GDP. So the core message is that in the statu quo, so at this time, this extension of program can be largely financed by the forecast and increased tax revenue. For example, in 2025, the cost of the extension is estimated at 2.34% of GDP, while additional revenue are estimated to 4.19% of GDP. The estimates in the graph have been made without taking into account the lifting of the VAT exemption for certain sectors that I spoke in the last slide. So the extension project will be rolled out gradually every 5 years, corresponding to the pre-electoral period. These periods are favorable enough for the public authority to launch popular initiatives such as extension and social protection. So for the support, for the leveling support for the reform within the PFM cycle, so we analyze that this social protection extension project could be benefiting from support of several stakeholders. So the powers in place will support the initiative because it will be able to benefit from the positive effect on the extension communication on its electorate. The population will applaud this reform since it will be considerable reduce the poverty rate. It should be remembered that the poverty in my country is reached 36% of in 2018. However, the main resistance will come from certain manufacturers who will now have to pay VAT. So negotiation may take a few times. That's why I have progressively extended the program until 2033. So thank you so much. This was my my presentation. So thank you. Any question for me? Hello?
Maybe I can ask a question since I don't see that anyone is, is raising one. Thank you, Mamadou. That was very interesting. My question will be on the slide on medium-term costed plan, please. You mentioned a gradual increase in terms of productive social safety net program, I think you call it. Yeah, this one. I mean, just out of curiosity, because I don't mean anything by this, just to understand your reasoning. I see that you're mentioning 50,000 households in 2022. And then you move in 3 years' time to 600,000 households. So it's pretty big scaling up. And I was wondering, 2035, you mentioned all the poor households in the country. How many would that be? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the productive social safety net is already exist. So now this year it cover 50,000 households. And then the extreme poor household in my country, there are around 60,000 households. So we target this population at the first time. So we estimated to target all this population in 2025. It will cost around 1 point, and the amount of the benefit will be the poverty line in my country. The poverty line, it is not in local currency to 22,000 in local currency, but it represents not enough in dollar. But I don't calculate at this time. So it is possible to target this population. And then later we'll extend to all the poor household in my country. The poorest household is around 3 million of population. And then we just give them the poverty line per month. So it can be financed in our social protection system. Right.
Okay, I think therefore there might be, from your explanation now, there might be a typo, Mamadou, in your presentation, because you wrote 600,000, but you actually mean 60,000, right?
No, 600,000, 600,000, yes, it's 600,000 household. 600,000, okay, it is 600,000. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said 60,000, not 600,000, which makes more sense, because to move from 50,000 to 600,000 in 3 years, that's why I was raising the question. It seems you will be increasing more than 10 times.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, okay. Yeah, it is. But the cost is not too enough, because the poverty line is not too high when we convert in dollars. So it can, but technically it can be more. It can be difficult. I'm sure. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So thank you for the remark. Yeah. Any other question? Okay, so I will stop the sharing. Thank you so much.
So I guess this is finished. So we need to do the assessment, and I think this is done, and we will see each other, I think, on Wednesday, or is it?
I think we need to go back to the main room now.
Yeah, but I think after we finish, we just leave. And we leave room and we go to the main room. I think that's finished for today. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. See you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Hi, Costanza, we're done.
Oh, good, 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 good. Excellent. Yes. Everything good? Everything went to plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Yoshiko, I think when you leave the meeting, it'll start processing the recording, and then just send it to me via WeTransfer. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope it was helpful and useful and not too traumatic. So I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday for the closing ceremony. Take care. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.